Should the Giants trade for an ace starting pitcher this season for the stretch run and potentially a playoff run? And what about in the middle infield with Thairo Estrada out 4 to 6 weeks? Should the Giants target Tim Anderson? You've got questions, we've got answers. Next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And coming up on today's show, a mailbag edition of the show. Thank you so much, as always, to everyone who submitted questions on Twitter. A little bit of fun with this one. Sometimes it's hard for me to determine which questions I should get to first. And today we asked ChatGPT to rank these questions in terms of what was the most interesting right now. And so we're going to go with the robots here, and our new robot overlords have determined the order of these questions. And yeah, so let's just jump right in. First one, congratulations to Candlestick Will, who asks, should the Giants trade for an ace, and what's the most likely package it would take? Do Bart and Ramos have any value? What minor league pitchers would be part of a deal? And so there's several questions within the question here, but in terms of should the Giants trade for an ace, the first thing that I want to say is that this is a trade deadline in which there's not, to me, like an obvious ace pitcher who is even available. And I think maybe some might disagree and say that Marcus Stroman is a true ace, and I think that kind of just depends on your perspective. But if we go to like MLB Trade Rumors, they just the other day, like yesterday, came out with a top 50 deadline trade candidates list. And if you look through this list, the number one player they have here is Lucas Giolito. And I think part of their thinking in the order in which they rank these players is contract status. And so someone like Giolito, who's just a pure free agent after the season, I think that factors in. It's not necessarily who are the best players, it's who are them in terms of bang for your buck, I suppose, because if you're getting a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez, who we talked about yesterday, there's all these other factors with the opt-out and the 3 years and $49 million left on his contract. But if we just look at Lucas Giolito, yes, he has a 3.50 ERA this season, but the expected ERA is in the low fours. The FIP is in the low fours. The expected FIP is in the low fours. And so I think he's kind of overperforming the peripherals, and he's always been a guy who's given up some homers, but, good stuff. And anyway, the question wasn't about Lucas Giolito, but if we look through, the number 2 player they've listed here is Jeimer Candelario, a third baseman with the Washington Nationals, and then a reliever, Scott Barlow. It's just, I don't see an ace here. Jordan Montgomery of the Cardinals, no. He's good. I mean, I would like Giolito. I would like Montgomery. Jack Flaherty, Marcus Stroman, I think I wouldn't have him number 6 as they rank him here, but I think it's because he has this opt-out, and so it is a risk for the teams, but that might mean a lower cost. The opt-out is like a factor that lowers the price. Shane Bieber is on this list. Michael Lorenzen. It's just not the greatest kind of pool of potential trade candidates. Like last year, you had, I don't remember if any true aces got dealt, but like Carlos Rodón, that would be a true ace on a team that in theory was selling in the Giants. They didn't end up trading him, but that kind of pitcher, I guess you could turn to the Mets and say if they're out of contention, you look at Verlander and Scherzer, but neither of those guys is performing up to their expectations. But I don't know, if the Mets do sell, those are some interesting names for sure. And I would expect that they might. But anyway, your question is, should the Giants trade for an ace? And if there's an ace out there, then by all means, I would say that would be great, especially as a rental player. It wouldn't cost too much because you're only getting the player for a few months, but it still would cost something. And otherwise, should they trade for a starter? Yeah, I think that a starting pitcher makes a lot of sense. But your next question about, do Bart and Ramos have any value? I think that Bart might have a little more value than Elliot Ramos, but neither of these players has a lot of value. They are worth a look, certainly. Like, some team would take a flyer on these guys, and I could see either of them traded. And Joey Bart specifically, I just think kind of change of scenery is in the cards for him at some point relatively soon. I think he's out of options next year, and so he's probably going to end up on another team in the next 6 to 9 months. But in terms of what minor league pitchers would be part of the deal, that's always hard for me to say. I mean, you could look at guys who are on the 40-man roster but are not like currently kind of in the mix and maybe are somewhat far away. And so some of those names, I don't have the 40-man actually pulled up in front of me, but you look through, okay, I do now, the 40-man, on the 40-man, some guys who, like Jose Cruz, and I don't know, guys like maybe Sean Jelly might have some appeal to some other teams, and Randy Rodriguez, or, Keaton Winn, like guys like that potentially could be of interest to other teams. And so anyway, we're going to get to some other questions next. The Avinash asks, why are so many of the Giants hitters getting plunked? Are they looking for curveballs and sliders and getting fastballs inside, or is it just luck? So I don't necessarily have an answer, but what I did dig into was the hit by pitch totals for the Giants. And yeah, they've been hit 44 times, which is the 8th most of any team. The Mets have been hit 55 times, which is the most. I believe they were hit the most last year, too. I also believe Mark Canha, who we're actually going to talk about in a couple minutes, is just like a guy who gets hit all the time. And part of it is like maybe standing on top of the plate. But yeah, the Giants rank 8th with 44 hit by pitches. But if we look at the specific players on the Giants and who's been hit the most, I find it interesting that Thairo Estrada has been hit 9 times, which is more than 2 times as many times as the next closest players. We've got J.D. Davis, Wade, Jock Peterson, and Joey Bart, interestingly, each hit 4 times. That's interesting about Bart because he has played a fraction of the games of all these other players ahead of him, or tied with him. So I think Estrada and Bart kind of hit the most in terms of per plate appearance, I guess. And they're right-handed hitters. They kind of stand on top of the plate. I don't have a reason for you. I haven't really felt like it's been out of control. Estrada, I don't know. I mean, I would imagine that teams maybe just feel like they need to throw inside to these particular players. But otherwise, I don't have a great answer for you as to why they're getting hit by pitches the 8th most. To me, it just seems kind of random more than anything. It's not like the Giants have a bunch of jerks who people throw at on purpose. I don't think really they've been hit on purpose at all this season. So coming up in just a minute, should the Giants target Tim Anderson? This is what ChatGPT thinks that we should discuss in just a minute. And we will obey our robot overlord in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by GameTime. Buying tickets to your favorite event, baseball, concerts, whatever, theater, shouldn't be so stressful. And for me, it always was in the past, using other websites. And a couple of the things that were always stressful for me, number one was not being sure I was getting the best price. And this is a thing, like, I never know when is the best time to buy the tickets. Well in advance, right before the event, somewhere in between. you never know, and it's always a gamble. And another thing, if I'm going to a venue I haven't been to before, I want to see what does the seat view look like. Otherwise, I'm like scrambling, looking around, trying to figure, looking at images of the stadium and trying to see what the different like tiers look like in terms of how high they are. And with GameTime, all of my concerns are alleviated because you get images of seat views and, most importantly to me, the lowest price guarantee. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, GameTime will just credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, as promised, we are going to get to more mailbag questions as selected by ChatGPT, including next about Tim Anderson. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, on Monday, we're going to be breaking down, my goodness, the final series of the first half and also the first couple rounds at least, and certainly a first round pick for the Giants in the MLB draft. So you're not going to want to miss Monday's episode. The Giants play the Colorado Rockies tonight at, 7:15 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Giants going with Ross Stripling. He was so effective last time in his 2 innings against the Mets, and then they pulled him. I would like to see, given where the Giants are in terms of their rotation, let him cruise. If he's going out there and shutting them down, let him go as long as he can. So yes, next question as selected by ChatGPT. Manny says, with Estrada out 4 to 6 weeks, do you think a trade could happen well before the trade deadline? I have my eyes set on Tim Anderson. He can play short and second. Numbers are down, but I noticed that exit velo is about career average. So Tim Anderson is an interesting guy. He always has been kind of in the league. He's 30 years old. He's got this... he's on the last year of his deal, but there's a club option for next year. I'm kind of evaluating this as we go. The club option is for, what is it for? It is for $14 million. I presume there's a buyout on that club option, and I'm not seeing it as I scroll through, but maybe there's no buyout at all. That would be interesting. So let's just presume there's no buyout, I guess. But Tim Anderson, oh my gosh, he's having, you're right, a very down year. Hitting .231, .268 on base, .274 slugging, a 49 weighted runs created plus. So, man, so the weighted on base average, which is a mouthful, but basically league average, weighted on base average is league average on base percentage, but it's a more kind of robust and all-encompassing and probably the best overall offensive metric to look at. And he's at .242, and the expected weighted on base average is .290. And so basically what I'm seeing there is that he's been a little bit unlucky, but not too much. And so, man, has he been bad. 9 stolen bases in 10 attempts, 0 homers, 276 plate appearances. He chases more than average by a lot. It's actually down this year versus his career norm in terms of chasing. But the power, like a .042 isolated power, no home runs, as I said, that's interesting to me. I don't know what's going on. And then we look at the defense, and he has played exclusively shortstop in his career up until this year, when he's played 18 innings at second base. And yeah, last year, -7 defensive runs saved at short. This year, -7 already at short. -3 outs above average. -2 outs above average the year before. Ultimate zone rating is negative. There's not a lot that I'm seeing here that I like, to be honest. And so, yeah, he's always had that aura of, or like the public perception of him is that he's like a star, but I don't know. I mean, you look at some of the past seasons and I can see it. Like in 2021, this guy hit 17 home runs. And this year, the last 2 years combined, in more plate appearances, he's only hit 6. And that's a very pitcher friendly or hitter friendly park in Chicago. So I don't know what's going on with him. But if it didn't cost much, he's a guy who certainly like I feel like there's the potential in there. If we look at his past, yeah, I mean, he's done it before, but he's not doing it right now. So I don't know exactly what's going on with him, but those are some alarming kind of numbers across the board, both offensively and defensively. And even as a base runner, maybe he's hurt. I mean, I don't know what's going on. He hasn't played a full season. He's only played in 64 games. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, but I mean, and your question, could they target someone well before the deadline? I don't know. I think they want to give like Casey Schmitt this opportunity to play second base, and also Brett Wisely. If you just look at kind of the minor league performance, he's a guy who maybe is deserving of some looks. And so, but, Casey Schmitt started the last game, even though it was a right-handed pitcher, made a really nice defensive play. He's hit some balls hard recently. I think it's worth giving your young players a look instead of like just kind of not giving him that opportunity and going with a veteran player right now, like Tim Anderson. But by the end of July, I think we'll have a better idea. Can Schmitt kind of handle it? And then at that point, Estrada would be close to coming back. And so I think someone who's kind of versatile, who could play short, could play second, maybe a center fielder, I don't know, makes a lot of sense. So the next question from Tycho, who says, what prospects are off the table this trade deadline? And I don't know, that's an interesting one because there are other questions. Actually, the next question we'll get to is about how all in am I on this season, and like, therefore, which of these kind of top prospects of the Giants are you willing to give up? And in terms of who's off the table, I think that I never want to take anyone off the table, but I don't think it makes sense to trade like a Patrick Bailey. Do you consider him a prospect, though? I mean, he is. He's still new to the league, but someone like that, I think I don't want to see them trade Luis Matos either. Even though he's somewhat struggled so far, he's 21 years old. He's the second youngest position player in the major leagues, and I really like the look of the swing. He's just kind of missing his pitch right now, and I just don't want to see them kind of give up on some of these young guys who have a lot of potential. I would say, I mean, would I take Casey Schmitt off the table? Maybe not, but these are guys in the majors. Maybe you're thinking guys who are not in the majors. Like I said, it's not the strongest class of potential trade candidates. If Shohei Ohtani becomes available, if the Angels just fall apart in the next few weeks and Ohtani becomes available, I really wouldn't take almost anyone off the table for him. But otherwise, I don't think Kyle Harrison is going to get dealt here. I don't think Marco Luciano is going to get dealt here. And so I think I would just take off the table some of the guys who have made it to the majors, and also Harrison and probably Luciano as well. That's just me, though. So coming up in just a minute, ChatGPT thinks we should discuss how all in am I on this season, and what about the possibility of trading for some outfielders like Cody Bellinger and Mark Canha. So we'll get to those questions in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, more questions as determined by ChatGPT. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers on Monday. Man, are we going to have a lot to talk about. The Giants playing a whole series here against the Rockies, hopefully at least 2 out of 3 and possibly a sweep. And also the MLB draft kicks off on Sunday, and we will have analysis of the guys the Giants have picked up to that point. And the Giants, by the way, play the Rockies tonight at 6:45 Pacific. 7:15 Pacific. You can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Jack asks, how all in are you on this season as far as what/who you're willing to trade? Like, I was all in 2 years ago. I'd like to see improvements made to this team, but I wouldn't push that many chips in. So, I mean, I'm kind of reminded of 2 years ago, they were pretty all in, and they got Chris Bryant, who was one of the best players available, if not the best. And they still didn't give up all that much because that's just the nature of the rental market. With Chris Bryant being a pure free agent at the end of that season, they gave up, what, Caleb Killian and Alexander Canario. They didn't give up their top guys. They gave up some guys who, I don't think Killian was already on the 40-man, or maybe he was, but Canario was. And so when I discuss kind of guys on the 40-man but not close to the majors, or even, someone like Joey Bart, and I'm just kind of scrolling through, I guess Marco Luciano already on the 40-man but not that close to the majors. He is in AA though, doing well. But what was the question? How all in am I on this season? I'm with you. I wouldn't give up, like I said, a lot of these guys like Matos and Bailey and Harrison, Luciano, that caliber, even Schmitt of player. But there's just not that many guys out there who would demand that caliber of player. And if it's Shohei Ohtani, I think you make an exception just because maybe, just maybe, like a playoff run and getting to experience San Francisco, I think people would really show up at the ballpark if the Giants were to acquire Shohei Ohtani in a trade. So he would see the best of the atmosphere at Oracle Park, and then you can dream on like making the playoffs with him, making a run in the playoffs with him, and then having that kind of help you get a leg up on trying to sign him. But that's not like the most likely scenario. So, but if he does become available, even he like would be a rental. And so I think people think, oh my gosh, the price is going to be more than it was for Juan Soto, for example. But it wouldn't, because Soto, you were getting 2.5 years of Juan Soto as the Padres versus 3 months of Shohei Ohtani. It makes a major difference. Even though this is the best player in the game, it wouldn't cost as much as it costs to acquire Soto simply because of the huge difference in terms of team control. So that said, it wouldn't be cheap, and you would have to put some guys on the table that I just mentioned as guys who are off the table. So yeah, I think that they should be, every season is, if you're in it, I think it's worth pursuing. And yeah, I think that they should be not all in, but pretty all in, like 80% in terms of just, but yeah, I mean, make improvements and try to make the playoffs. You're in position and go for it. Mike says, what do you think about a trade for Cody Bellinger or Mark Canha to add some outfield depth? What would the Giants need to give up for either of those guys? So I like it. I think that a guy like Cody Bellinger, they tried to sign him in the first place. And by the way, I'm going to do a somewhat victory lap on Kevin Kiermaier, who was someone I was talking about last offseason as a possible signing candidate. We compared Bellinger and Kiermaier a lot. I think Kiermaier's kind of been better overall, but both of those guys have been better than Michael Conforto, who kind of became that other guy they pivoted to when Bellinger and maybe even Kiermaier signed elsewhere. I think Kiermaier signed later, but both of those guys have been better than Conforto. There was a question about, is it too soon to call Conforto a bust? I would say so. I mean, why not just wait it out the rest of the year? But so far, he's kind of been a disappointment. And he's a key to their team. If he can get hot and he could carry them for a month, he's that kind of guy. But Cody Bellinger, I mean, he's having a rebound season with the Cubs. I mean, my goodness, 298 average, 352 on base, 486 slugging. Those are Cody Bellinger-like numbers. 355 weighted on base average. The expected numbers, just a 294 weighted on base average. So interestingly, like really outperforming the expected numbers, but giving you good base running. And in terms of defense, looking at defensive runs saved, he's played some first base for Chicago and done pretty well there. And he's played center field and he's been okay, but not great. And yeah, so that's what I was saying. I think Kiermaier is still great. And so, again, I haven't checked in on him in a while, but somewhat of a victory lap I'm going to do there for being right about Kevin Kiermaier still having it in him. Both of those players have been worth about 1.8 Fangraphs wins above replacement. So, anyway, I like Bellinger more than I like Canha, but yeah, I mean, the idea of just adding some outfield depth with Mitch Haniger, like, being on the IL for a long time and deep into August and even September and maybe beyond. And yeah, I mean, a corner outfielder, I do think makes a lot of sense. Or not a corner, just an outfielder. And so Bellinger, yeah, that's an interesting one because he's on the last year of his, it's just a 1-year deal. And so he's like a great fit in my opinion. And what would it cost? It wouldn't cost all that much. It would, because like I said, he's a rental. He's a free agent at the end of the season. And so it just wouldn't cost all that much. And if the Cubs are truly selling, I think that he makes a ton of sense actually. And then Mark Canha, I just need to check on his contract status. I know that, I mean, he's a nice player. He's a good like on base guy. And the downside of Mark Canha is that he's kind of slow and not a great defender. And so he's got a $11.5 million club option for next year with a $2 million buyout. And so kind of a pure rental. It is a club option and you could choose the buyout if you want to. But I think the Giants maybe were interested in him as well before he ended up signing with the Mets. And I like his kind of approach and bat, but defensively he's not great. And so it's not my favorite fit. I mean, I'm just going to pull up the numbers really quick. He's played some first base for the Mets, which tells you that they don't love his defense. He's also played 3 innings at third base. And in the outfield, yeah, the numbers just haven't been great there in the outfield, historically in his career and this season as well. So anyway, I think I kind of gave my opinion there. That is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers on Monday, you are not going to want to miss this show. We're going to be breaking down a big 3-game series. I think it's important to take 2 out of 3 at least against the Rockies here and hopefully sweep. That would be great. They would be 50-40. I like those round numbers. And also the MLB draft. The Giants are going to make some picks and we'll be breaking them down on Monday. Giants play the Rockies tonight at 7:15 Pacific. You can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like the show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. Also, shout out, thanks to ChatGPT for sorting these questions for now, and we'll get to more of these questions later on. Don't you worry. So anyway, have a great weekend. Can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.